Well, the Super Bowl this year was a bit of a boring game, at least for three quarters. But the other side of the Super Bowl every year is always the advertisements and which company did the best and drew the most connection with consumers. And a pleasure to talk about that with Americus Reed, marketing professor here at the Wharton School and also co host of the Marketing Matters podcast, which you can listen to every week on the Wharton Podcast Network. Americus, how are you, sir? Enjoyed the
I'm doing
game?
ver Hi, Dan. I'm doing very well. It was not an exciting game, like you said, but as a marketer, we're always ready for the ads.
All right. So, what were your general thoughts about the ads? And maybe even more so, when you're getting ready for a Super Bowl, what are your expectations for the ads?
I love that question, Dan. I think that what I saw last night, I dare say use the term underwhelmed, but I have to be honest. I was a little underwhelmed, and that's not a bad thing because what I think I understand now, Dan, is that the stakes are so high in a situation where there are very, very few things where 100 plus million people are going to be watching at the same time. And so all of the companies, brands, products, services, organizations, they realize that we really have to come with everything we've got. And so it really raises the overall bar such that nothing is outstanding. Nothing is so super differentiated that you're just so blown away because every one of these ads is really trying to do as much as it can. So I thought there were some good moments, but I have to say that we've reached, for me, in my opinion, we've reached kind of a plateau in the sense of it's just hard to do something that's so incredibly interesting and differentiated and innovative.
Not a surprise that we saw as many ads in and around AI that we saw.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this last time on the podcast. Really thinking about this notion of AI and how is AI changing things. And you and I discussed this. We said, listen, there's going to be a big movement, if not already, to really integrate creative outputs using AI. And so, it's not surprising that we saw that last night. It's a tool, and marketers are going to be forced to use this tool and really try to use it creatively. So that wasn't surprising, but I think we're going to see more of this. We're going to really see a sort of creative wars happening to
Right.
see who can really use these tools in the best way possible.
Any ads really connect with you? I mean, and even though it was a down year, in your opinion, there's probably one or two that probably did connect. I know I had a couple.
Uh, yeah, you know what? We were kind of talking about this a little bit back and forth offline, Dan, and I love the Dunkin's ad. I have to give
Oh, yeah,
props. I mean,
absolutely.
I don't. Yeah, there's something about nostalgia for me. And by the way, that was a theme that I think we saw a lot of last night, like nostalgia, whether it be in the context of trusted characters that we've seen or songs that we know really well. We saw a lot of that. And the Dunkin's commercial for me had just about every single character from my favorite portfolio of shows that I could possibly name. And as
Yeah.
I saw each one, Urkel and Carlton and Sam from Cheers, as they coming up, I was just like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
And so I had a really strong reaction to that one. How about you?
So I loved the Lay's commercial with the father and daughter, the
Yeah.
farmers.
Nice.
The Dunkin' commercial I thought was great.
Mhm.
The one that really I think connected with me as well, and I was kind of a little surprised, was the Kendall Jenner Fanatics ad
Oh,
because
interesting.
because that rumor of her having a negative impact on basketball players has certainly been out there,
Yeah.
and to see her kind of say, "Okay, football guys, now it's your turn," that was kind of funny to me.
That was very funny, Dan. What I love about this, you're pointing to another sort of theme that I saw last night, and that is sort of humor. So one of the
Yeah.
things that was very important is to try to strike the right tone. And we see a lot of this sort of absurdist, what's been called unhinged, kind of memorific, if you will, humor to try to sort of make those points that you were describing in the Kendall Jenner ad. I also loved the Xfinity Jurassic Park ad because I'm a
Yeah.
huge fan of that movie, and I just love the way they sort of turned it around to sort of show here's what would have happened if you'd have actually had the power to sort of juice the park, and it would have been a totally different, completely different turn of events for the movie. So that was pretty cool as well.
So let me touch on the humor component of it as well, and the dynamic of, and I think the Budweiser is probably the example I want to use here because they
Yeah.
have a variety of different brands. So last night they had an ad for Budweiser, which
Yep.
was the traditional, the horse and the American Eagle.
Yes.
Then they had the Bud Light, which was Peyton Manning, Shane Gillis, and other
Yes.
funny guys in an ad.
Yes.
And so maybe because they have the variety of brands,
That's a great
they
point.
can play both sides of the fence a little bit here, and it works out on great. And maybe there's an expectation of which brand is going to get which component, the humor or the kind of the supportive, connection, the touch your heartstrings.
I love that point, Dan. I think you putting into the context of a kind of multi-pronged strategy for Budweiser and Bud Light makes a lot of sense, right? Especially in the context of Bud Light trying to come back from the last few years of trying to deal with
Yeah.
sort of being in the crosshairs.
Yeah.
So I love what they did there because, to your point, they use a little bit of humor, but they also, for Bud Light, but they also leaned in on this made of America. This was interesting, right? Made of America. And you're watching this, you're watching the Clydesdale, you're watching the American Eagle, and they're trying to redefine and really recapture that American identity. So like playing both sides here and like trying to sort of do a little bit of humor to sort of like soften the blow here for what Bud Light's been dealing with in several years past,
Yeah.
but also leaning in onto, hey, we do have a sense of this Americana that we don't want to let go of with respect to our brand. I think was a very interesting strategy.
And I guess Levi's tried to do that with their commercial
Oh,
because it seemed like it was just a variety of different generations of people wearing blue jeans over the course of that company's time.
dude, I love that commercial. Recently, or let's say a couple of months back, we talked to the former CEO of Levi's, and it's just the red tag. It's
Yeah.
iconic.
Yeah.
I was counting, Dan, the butts that the butts that I could
No, you're right.
recognize in terms of, there's Bruce Springsteen, all these, you
Oh, yeah.
see this like, wow, this is super iconic imagery. And the notion of, your life is lived in Levi's just brought to a really nice crescendo and sort of touching all these famous people. I think George Michael might have been in this,
Yeah.
or a reference to him as well. And then to end it with Doechii, sort of a more modern, sort of current pop cultural icon. Really just well done and just really capturing the historical context of Levi's brand.
Let me finish up with this, and it's the dynamic between Pepsi and Coke right now,
Ah,
and you and I talked about this offline, is that obviously they're playing for the same customer base,
yeah.
that but they're using, or at least Pepsi is, they're using kind of some of Coke's backstory with the polar bears to try
Yeah.
and support their narrative. And we saw this in another commercial where a Coke delivery guy was making a delivery to a store and
Yep.
all the Coke cans fell off and he drank a Pepsi instead. So that dynamic between those two companies is very interesting.
It's super interesting, Dan. I got to tell you, you're my guy. I grew up in Georgia.
Yeah.
So that's Coke country.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
dear
yeah.
Coca-Cola, shots fired. You have 24 hours to respond because this is like we're coming right at you. We're gonna co-op your polar bear imagery and iconicness,
Yeah.
and we're gonna do battle now. And so, Dan, the Cola Wars might have been revitalized last night. So this will be very exciting to see what happens and what Coke's response will be, and sort of what the dynamic and the competition will be moving forward.
What do then companies expect after they run an ad in the Super
I,
Bowl?
I love that question, Dan. So here's the thing. So what's happened in the past is we have this moment where all of these folks are engaged in watching and you capture them in that moment. What we've seen in marketing is that we've got a pre-build up to that. We saw a lot of brands releasing ads, teasing ads, all these different things before the big moment, Super Bowl, and then what comes after. Here's the interesting thing, Dan. They've got to keep this conversation going. They
Mhm.
have to keep the water cooler discussion. They want Dan Loney to come on his podcast and talk about it.
Yeah.
They need to keep having the conversations and discussions and elevation of it and amplification of these commercials because it continues to breathe life into those creatives that we saw last night. And so
Right.
this is a big event. This is a long-term horizon, and brands are trying to really keep that energy, that kinetic energy going across this time frame so that they can continue to keep interest and get people to really focus in and resonate with these different types of ads that they produced last night.
Always fun to talk to you, sir. Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot, Dan. Talk to you soon.
Americus Reed, marketing professor here at the Wharton School and co-host with Barbara Kahn of the Marketing Matters podcast every week here on the Wharton Podcast Network.